My grandfather, Baba Ola, built an empire out of absolutely nothing. He was a giant of a man, respected from Lagos to Los Angeles. So, at the will reading, nobody was surprised when he left my cousins luxury condos. He left my brother Tunde millions in cold, hard cash. But me? I got a box. Not a safety deposit box full of gold, not a jewelry box, just an old, scratched-up wooden shoebox that looked like it had been pulled out of the trash. My father shook his head, a look of pure pity on his face. My brother Tunde didn't even try to hide his laugh. It was loud, echoing off the mahogany walls. "Classic Malik," he whispered to his wife. Even from the grave, the old man knew he couldn't handle real money. I said nothing. I just stared at the battered wood in my hands, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of the Family Fractures community for more inspiring stories. My name is Malik, and in my family, silence was seen as weakness. We are a loud family. My father, Uncle Jide, my brother Tunde, they dominate every room they walk into. They talk fast, move fast, and make sure everyone knows how successful they are. Tunde was the golden boy. By 25, he was already running one of Baba's tech firms. He drove the newest cars, wore the flashiest watches, and had a handshake that could crush your fingers. I was different. I liked to paint. I liked to listen. I didn't care about the boardroom or the stock market. While my parents bragged about Tunde's killer instinct, they apologized for me. "Malik is finding himself," my mother would say with a tight smile. What she really meant was, Malik is a disappointment. But Baba Ola saw something else. To the public, he was a ruthless businessman. But on Sunday afternoons, when the rest of the family was busy networking or arguing over politics, he would sit with me on the back porch. We wouldn't talk much. He'd sip his tea, and I'd sketch in my notebook. One day, he pointed to a bird sitting perfectly still on a fence, watching a chaotic flock of sparrows fighting over crumbs. "You see that one, Malik?" he asked, his voice deep and raspy. "He's not starving, he's waiting. The loud ones get the scraps, the quiet ones get the feast." I didn't fully understand him back then. I just thought he was being nice because I was the black sheep. When Baba got sick, the house turned into a circus. People came out of the woodwork, cousins I hadn't seen in years, business partners, politicians. They all hovered around his bed, talking about his legacy, his assets, making sure they saw their faces. Tunde was there every day, talking loudly about quarterly earnings, trying to prove he was ready to take over. "Don't worry, Baba, I've got it all under control," he'd say, checking his phone every 2 minutes. My father brought lawyers, my aunts brought pastors, but nobody just sat with him. Nobody asked him how he felt. They were all mourning the billionaire, not the man. I was the only one who just hung out. I'd bring my sketchbook and sit by the window. Sometimes I'd read to him, sometimes I'd just hold his hand when the pain meds made him drift off. One night, about a week before he passed, he squeezed my hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were sharp. "He only see the harvest, Malik," he whispered. "They don't know anything about the seed." I frowned. "What do you mean, Baba?" He smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye that I hadn't seen in years. "You'll see. Don't let them change you. The world has enough noise." That was the last real conversation we had. The funeral was a production, huge, expensive, and impersonal. And now here we were in the plush office of Mr. Adebayo, the family attorney. The air conditioning was humming, but I was sweating. Tunde was leaning back in his leather chair, looking bored. My parents were tense, leaning forward. Mr. Adebayo adjusted his glasses and started reading. To my son Jide, I leave the Abuja estate and the construction holdings. My father nodded, satisfied. To my grandson Tunde, I leave the technology division and a sum of $5 million. Tunde funked-pumped, shouting yes a little too loudly. My mother clapped. The list went on. Millions here, properties there. Finally, the room got quiet. Mr. Adebayo adjusted his glasses and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. And to my grandson Malik, he read, his voice flat, I leave my personal thinking box. He reached under his desk and pulled out the old wooden box. He slid it across the polished table. It made a scraping sound that made everyone wince. That was it. No money, no shares, no house. Just a box that looked like it held shoe polish. The silence stretched for a second before Tunde broke it with that laugh. A thinking box? He scoffed. Guess Baba figured you needed help using your brain, little brother. My father sighed, standing up to shake the lawyer's hand, completely ignoring me. Well, Baba always did have a strange sense of humor. I felt small, smaller than I had ever felt. I reached out and pulled the box toward me. It was lighter than I expected. The wood was worn smooth at the corners, and the lid was shut tight with a simple metal latch. I could feel their eyes on me, judging, dismissing, pitying. I stood up, tucked the box under my arm, and turned to leave. "Wait, aren't you going to open it?" Tunde called out, grinning. "Maybe there's a candy bar inside." I didn't turn back. I walked out of that office, down the hall, and into the elevator. But as the doors closed, shutting out their laughter, I looked down at the box. I noticed something scratched on the wood right near the latch. It wasn't just scratches. It was a date, and underneath the date, barely visible, were 3 words that made my heart stop. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic in the parking garage, my hands trembling as I traced the words scratched into the wood. The first seed. Underneath that, a date, October 1, 1960. Independence Day. But for our family, that date usually meant the day Baba started his first company. I stared at the box. It smelled like old cedar and pipe tobacco, Baba's smell. For a second, I expected him to pop out of the back seat and tell me this was all a lesson on humility. But the car was silent, just the hum of the ventilation system and the thumping of my own heart. I didn't go to the family reception. I knew exactly what that would look like. Tunde popping bottles of champagne, my dad bragging to anyone who would listen, and my mom giving me that sad, tight-lipped smile that said, "Maybe you can get a loan from your brother." I couldn't stomach it. Instead, I drove to my small apartment in Yaba. It wasn't much, just a 1-bedroom with a leaky faucet, but it was quiet, and right now, quiet was the only luxury I could afford. I set the box down on my kitchen table. It looked ridiculous sitting there against the laminate countertop. A billionaire's final gift. A shoebox. I finally worked up the courage to undo the latch. It clicked open with a rusty snap. I held my breath, lifting the lid. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a secret stash of diamonds, a deed to a hidden mansion, a check for $1 million hidden under a false bottom. I looked inside and my stomach dropped. Dirt. The box was half filled with dry, red soil. Resting on top of the dirt was an old, jagged rock, about the size of a golf ball. That was it. No money, no letter, no explanation, just dirt and a rock. I sat back in my chair, covering my face with my hands. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it wasn't a happy one. It was bitter. "You got me, Baba," I whispered to the empty room. "You really got me." I felt like a fool. I had defended him. I had sat by his bedside while everyone else checked their watches. And this was what I got? A box of dirt? My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the family group chat. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Tunde had posted a photo. He was holding a glass of expensive scotch, grinning like a shark with the caption, "To the future, #empire, #legacy." Then a separate text just to me. "Hey bro, don't spend all that dirt in one place. Let me know if you need cash for groceries." I threw the phone onto the couch. The anger finally hit me. It wasn't about the money. I never cared about the millions. It was the disrespect. It was the feeling that Baba Ola, the one person who I thought saw me, had actually been laughing at me the whole time too. I grabbed the box, ready to dump the whole thing in the trash. I walked over to the bin, tipped it over, and watched the red dust pour out. The rock tumbled out with a heavy thud. But then I heard something else clatter against the plastic bin. It wasn't the rock. It was metallic. I frowned. I reached into the trash can and sifted through the pile of red soil. My fingers brushed against something cold and hard. I pulled it out and wiped it off on my jeans. It was a key. But not a normal house key. It was old, heavy, and made of brass that had turned green with age. It looked like something from a century ago. And taped to the head of the key was a tiny yellowed strip of paper with handwriting so small I had to squint to read it. It wasn't a bank account number. It wasn't a safe deposit box number. It was an address. I recognized the street name immediately. It wasn't in the financial district where Baba's skyscrapers were. It wasn't in the fancy gated communities where my parents lived. It was in the oldest, roughest part of the city, a place where the roads were full of potholes and the streetlights didn't work, a place our family hadn't stepped foot in for 40 years. Why would Baba send me there? Was this another joke? I held the key up to the light. On the side, engraved deep into the metal, was a single word: listen. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door. I didn't care that it was getting dark. I didn't care that my car was low on gas. I had to know. I drove across the city, the skyline fading in my rearview mirror as I entered the neighborhood everyone told me to avoid. I pulled up to the address, my headlights cutting through the gloom. It wasn't a house. It wasn't a bank. I killed the engine and stared out the windshield, my blood running cold. If this was my inheritance, then Baba Ola was involved in something way deeper and way more dangerous than any of us had ever imagined. I stepped out of the car, my sneakers crunching on broken glass. The building in front of me was a ghost. The sign above the door was faded and peeling, but I could just barely make out the hand-painted letters, Ola's Electronics and Repairs. My jaw tightened. This was it. The legend, the story Baba used to tell us when we were kids, that he started his empire fixing radios in a shack. Tunde always rolled his eyes at those stories, calling them ancient history. But standing here, in the dark, with the smell of burning trash and exhaust in the air, it felt heavy. It felt real. I checked over my shoulder. The street was empty, but I had that prickly feeling on the back of my neck like I was being watched. I hurried to the metal security door. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the brass key twice before I finally jammed it into the lock. Click. The mechanism groaned, rusty and stiff, but it turned. I shoved the heavy door open and slipped inside, quickly pulling it shut behind me. Total darkness. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of dust and solder and old oil. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing rows of metal shelves stacked with ancient radios, bulky televisions, and tangled wires. It looked like time had stopped here in 1980. I walked deeper into the shop, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Listen, I whispered to myself, repeating the word on the key. Listen to what? The silence? The rats scratching in the walls? I reached the back of the shop, where a small wooden desk sat covered in papers that had turned yellow with age. And there, sitting right in the center of the desk, cleared of all dust as if someone had wiped it down yesterday, was an old-school cassette player. My heart skipped a beat. Next to the player was a single cassette tape with a handwritten label, "For Malik." I reached out, my fingers trembling, and pressed the play button. The tape hissed for a moment, and then Baba's voice filled the small room. It wasn't the weak, raspy voice from the hospital. It was strong, clear, the voice of the man who commanded boardrooms. "Malik," the recording began, "if you are listening to this, it means you passed the first test. You didn't throw the box away. You didn't let your pride stop you from getting your hands dirty." I swallowed hard, leaning against the desk for support. "Your brother, your father, your cousins, they think wealth is what you show the world. They think I left them millions, but I didn't leave them a fortune, Malik. I left them a trap." I froze. A trap? The money I gave them is tied to debts and deals they are too arrogant to understand. They will spend it, they will flash it, and within a year, the vultures I kept at bay will come for them. They will lose everything because they never learned how to build. They only know how to take. The tape clicked, and there was a pause. I stared at the machine, my mind racing. Tunde, my parents. They were celebrating right now, thinking they were set for life, but they were actually walking off a cliff. "But you," Baba's voice returned, softer this time. "You are the builder. You are the listener. This shop isn't just a ruin, son. Look under the floorboards beneath your feet. That is where the real foundation lies." I looked down at the concrete. There was a loose wooden pallet right under my feet. I kicked it aside. Underneath, there was a small metal handle set into the floor. I knelt down, gripping the handle with both hands. I pulled with everything I had. It was heavy, grinding against stone, but slowly a square section of the floor lifted up. I shone my light into the hole. It wasn't gold bars. It wasn't cash. It was a stack of thick, leather-bound ledgers and a hard drive that looked military grade. The money is easy. What is in that hole is worth more than money. It is the leverage. It is the secrets of every politician, every CEO, and every partner who helped me build this city. It is the insurance policy that kept our family safe. And now it is yours. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. Dangerous power. I reached down to grab the hard drive, but suddenly the hair on my arm stood up. The silence of the shop was broken, not by the tape, but by the sound of a car door slamming shut just outside the front entrance. Then heavy footsteps crushing the glass on the sidewalk. "Turn off the light," I told myself, panic spiking in my chest. I scrambled to kill my flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. But it was too late. The front door handle jiggled violently. Then a loud bang as someone kicked the metal door. "We know you're in there," a voice shouted. A voice I recognized instantly. It wasn't Tunde. It was someone much worse. I backed away into the shadows, clutching the hard drive to my chest, realizing that Baba's test had just turned into a fight for survival. The person banging on that door wasn't there to talk. They were there to make sure the secrets in this hole never saw the light of day, and I was the only thing standing in their way. The metal door groaned under another heavy kick. Bang! Dust rained down from the ceiling, landing in my hair. "Malik, listen to me," the voice shouted again, smoother this time, trying to sound calm. "I know you found the shop. Open the door, son. We just want to protect the assets. Your father sent me." My stomach turned over. It was Mr. Adebayo, the family lawyer, the man who had shaken my hand at the funeral and told me how sorry he was for my loss, the man who had handed me the box with a look of pity. He wasn't here to help. He was here to clean up. I scrambled backward, shoving the heavy hard drive into the waistband of my jeans and tucking the thickest ledger under my arm. The cassette player? I had to leave it. There was no time. Crack! The lock was giving way. I could see a sliver of streetlight widening at the doorframe. I didn't wait to see who was standing behind Mr. Adebayo. I knew he wasn't alone. You don't come to a place like this at night without muscle. I scanned the dark shop frantically. Think, Malik, think! Baba used to tell me stories about this place. He said he kept a way out for the tax collectors and the troublemakers. The ventilation shaft. I spotted it high up on the back wall, covered by a grimy metal grate. It was small, tight, but it was my only shot. I grabbed an old metal shelving unit and dragged it over, trying to be as quiet as possible. The metal leg scraped against the concrete. Squeak! The banging stopped instantly. He's moving, a different voice growled from outside. Break it down, now! I scrambled up the shelves, my sneakers slipping on the rusty metal. I reached the grate and clawed at the screws. Thank God for Baba's lack of renovations. The screws were loose, rusted almost all the way through. I ripped the grate off, my fingernails tearing, and tossed it onto a stack of old tires to muffle the sound. The front door burst open with a deafening crash. Flashlight beams sliced through the darkness, sweeping wildly across the room. "Find him!" Adebayo yelled. He didn't sound like a lawyer anymore. He sounded like a mob boss. I squeezed my body into the narrow, dusty tunnel just as a beam of light hit the wall where I had been standing a second ago. I pulled my legs in and held my breath. The shaft smelled like dead rats and old insulation. I crawled, elbows scraping against raw sheet metal, moving blindly toward where I hoped the alley was. Below me, I heard them tearing the shop apart. "The floor!" one of them shouted. "The safe is open! It's empty!" "Find him!" Adebayo screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "If he leaves with that drive, we are all dead! Do you hear me? Dead!" I froze. Dead? I thought this was just about money. I thought this was about hiding some tax fraud or an offshore account. But the fear in Adebayo's voice was primal. Whatever was on this hard drive wasn't just illegal, it was lethal. I reached the end of the shaft and kicked out the external vent. I tumbled out into the alleyway, landing hard on my shoulder. Pain shot down my arm, but adrenaline numbed it instantly. I scrambled to my feet. My car was parked out front, blocked by their SUV. I couldn't go back there. I took off running. I ran through the maze of back alleys, jumping over puddles of stagnant water and dodging stray dogs. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and the sounds of the neighborhood faded into the distant hum of the highway. I found a 24-hour diner about 3 miles away. I ducked into a booth in the back, away from the windows, shaking so bad I almost knocked over the salt shaker. I ordered a black coffee just to keep the waitress away, and then, with trembling hands, I opened the leather-bound ledger I had managed to save. I expected to see numbers, bank accounts, routing codes. But the first page wasn't math. It was a list of names and dates. I ran my finger down the list. Half the names were crossed out in red ink. The other half were circled. I recognized some of them, senators, police chiefs, competitors. And then I saw it. Near the bottom of the page, dated just 3 weeks ago, 2 days before Baba died, was a new entry. It wasn't a name. It was a transaction note. Payment refused. Initiation of Protocol Omega. And right next to it, signed in a handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards my entire life, was a signature that made the room spin. It wasn't Mr. Adebayo's signature. I stared at the paper, tears pricking my eyes. The betrayal didn't just cut deep, it severed everything I thought I knew about my bloodline. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was buzzing again. A text from the person whose signature was staring back at me from the ledger. "Malik, where are you? Mom is worried sick. Come home." I looked at the text, then I looked at the ledger, and for the first time I realized that Baba didn't just die of old age. He was taken out, and the person who did it was waiting for me to come home for dinner. I stared at the signature on the page until the lines started to blur. Tunde Adebayo Johnson. My brother. My own flesh and blood. The brother who had laughed at my dirt box just hours ago. The brother who was currently drinking champagne in our family's mansion. He hadn't just signed a business deal. The entry next to his name, Protocol Omega, wasn't financial jargon. In Baba's old code, the one he taught us when we were playing spies as kids, Omega meant the end. Tunde had authorized the cutoff of Baba's medical security. He didn't pull the plug with his hands, but he signed the paper that let the sharks in. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Tunde. "Bro, stop playing games. Dad is getting angry. Tell us where you are." I looked at the phone in my hand. It wasn't a communication device anymore. It was a tracking beacon. If Tunde was willing to sign off on Baba's death for a bigger share of the inheritance, he wouldn't hesitate to silence the brother who found the receipts. I pulled the SIM card out, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces into the dregs of my cold coffee. Then I stood up and walked out of the diner, leaving the phone on the table. I was off the grid now. I had the ledger and the hard drive, but I had no way to access the encrypted files without tripping an alarm. I needed a safe house. I flipped through the ledger again, my hands shaking. The names were all politicians and big shots, people I couldn't trust. But on the very last page, scribbled in pencil, was a name I hadn't heard in 20 years. Mama K, Sector 4, Market. Mama K, the woman who used to sell roasted plantain and fish outside my primary school? Baba used to buy lunch from her every Friday. I always thought it was just because he liked her cooking. But now, looking at her name in a book full of state secrets, I realized nothing Baba did was accidental. I drove to Sector 4. It was the middle of the night, but the market never really slept. Generators hummed, music thumped from small bars, and the smell of exhaust and spices hung heavy in the air. I parked the car 3 blocks away and pulled my hoodie up. I found her stall. It was closed, shuttered behind a metal gate, but there was a light on in the apartment above it. I climbed the rusty side stairs and knocked 3 times, a specific rhythm Baba used to tap on my bedroom door. Tap, 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 tap. The door opened immediately. A woman stood there. She was older now, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask who I was. She just looked at the ledger tucked under my arm and stepped aside. "You took your time, Malik. Your grandfather said you were the slow one. I told him you were just careful." I stepped inside. The room was small but filled with monitors. Computer screens hummed against the wall, displaying live feeds of the city, traffic cameras, police dispatches, and even a feed that looked disturbingly like the security camera inside my parents' gated community. "Mama K, who are you?" I whispered. She locked the door and moved to the computers. "I'm the one who watched when he couldn't. I'm the eyes, Malik. He was the brain. Now, give me the drive." I handed her the military-grade hard drive. She plugged it into a massive server tower. Screens flickered red, then black. "It's biometric," she said, her fingers flying across a keyboard. "It needs a fingerprint, But not just any fingerprint. It needs a pulse. It needs a living match. "Baba is gone," I said, panic rising. "We can't—" "Not him," she cut me off. She spun her chair around and pointed at me. "You. He coded it to your DNA, Malik. He knew Tunde would try to crack it. Tunde has the ambition, but you have the blood." She grabbed my hand and slammed it onto the scanner. A green light swept across the room. On the main screen, a progress bar shot to 100%. Access granted. Files began to open, thousands of them. Emails, voice recordings, bank transfers. "Look," Mama Kay whispered, pointing to a video file dated 2 days ago. I watched as the video played. It was grainy footage inside Baba's hospital room. My father and Tunde were standing over Baba's bed. Baba was awake, looking weak but furious. "You cannot sell the tech division," he was wheezing. "It is the backbone of this family." "It's done, old man," Tunde sneered, leaning down. "We have a buyer in Dubai. They pay cash. We don't need your dusty empire anymore. We need liquidity." "If you sign that deal," Baba warned, "you initiate the collapse. The debt I held back, it will crush you." "Let it come," my father said, turning away. "We are the future." The video cut out. I felt sick. They didn't just let him die, they stressed him to death to seal a deal. "They sold it," Mama Kay said, her face grim. "They sold the tech division yesterday. The money hit their accounts this morning." "That's why they were celebrating," I muttered. "Yes," she said, "but look at the timestamp on the transfer." I looked closer. The money had come in, but 5 minutes later, it had gone out. Transfer to unknown account. Balance $0. "What?" I gasped. "Where did the money go?" Mama Kay smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "Baba didn't just leave you a box of dirt, Malik. He left a failsafe. When they sold the company against his wishes, the system automatically routed the funds." "Routed them where?" I asked. "To the one place they can't touch." She typed a command, and a new window popped up. It was a live feed of a bank vault, but not a regular bank. This was a private, offshore facility. "The money is safe," she said, "but Tunde doesn't know it's gone yet. He thinks he's a billionaire. When he wakes up tomorrow and tries to pay his investors, the check is going to bounce. And the people he borrowed from, Malik, they don't sue, they break legs." My phone, which I had left at the diner, was obviously gone, but Mama Kay's computer suddenly started pinging with an alert. "Someone is accessing the GPS on your car," she said, zooming in on the map. "They found the Honda. Are they coming here?" "No," she said, "they're not coming for you. They've stopped looking for you." "Why?" "Because they found something else," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Malik, did you leave anything else in your apartment? Anything personal?" I froze. "Just my sketchbook and the box, the wooden box with the dirt." "The dirt?" she repeated, her eyes widening in horror. "It's just soil," I said. "It's not soil, you idiot," she shouted, grabbing a jacket and tossing it to me. "That red clay, it only comes from one specific region in the village. It hides radiation signatures. Baba wasn't hiding the key in the dirt. He was hiding what was under the dirt." "What was under it?" "The rock," she said, pulling a shotgun under the desk. "Please tell me you have the rock." I patted my jacket pocket. It was empty. My heart stopped. I had left the rock on my kitchen table in Yaba. "If Tunde figures out what is inside that stone," Mama Kay said, racking the slide of the shotgun, "he won't just be rich, he'll be a kingmaker. And you, Malik, you'll be the first loose end he ties up." She threw open the back door. We have to get to your apartment before they do. Run." Mama Kay drove like she had a death wish. Her old Toyota truck screamed down the Third Mainland Bridge, weaving in and out of traffic with surgical precision. I was gripping the dashboard so hard my knuckles turned white. "You have to tell me," I shouted over the roar of the engine. "What is in that rock? Is it diamonds? Gold?" Mama Kay didn't take her eyes off the road. "Diamonds?" she scoffed. "Malik, diamonds are just shiny pebbles for tourists. What your grandfather hid in that stone is the future." She swerved to miss a bus, tires screeching. "It's a raw sample of a conductive mineral he discovered on a survey trip in the 80s. It's not on the periodic table yet. It powers that hard drive. It powers the satellites. It's the battery for the whole empire. If Tunde cracks that rock open, he doesn't just get rich, he gets the patent for the next century of energy." My head was spinning. A rock, a dirty, jagged rock sitting on my kitchen table next to a bag of stale bread, was worth more than the entire tech company Tunde had just sold. We screeched to a halt a block away from my apartment building. My heart sank. 2 black SUVs were already parked out front, idling with their lights off. The family security detail. "They beat us," I whispered. "Only if they know what they're looking for," Mama Kay said, reaching into the back seat and pulling out a heavy wrench. "Stay behind me, and Malik, if I tell you to run, you don't argue, you run." We moved through the shadows, avoiding the front entrance. Mama Kay led me around the back, popping the lock on the service door with a quick, practiced twist of a knife. We crept up the stairwell, the smell of cheap cleaning supplies filling my nose. When we reached the 3rd floor, my door was already kicked in. The wood was splintered around the frame. I could hear shouting from inside. "Tear it apart! Every inch!" It was Tunde. He sounded unhinged. "He moved the money! Find the codes!" I stepped closer to the doorway, peering through the crack. My apartment was destroyed. The sofa was slashed open. The TV was smashed on the floor. Books were torn from the shelves. And there, standing in the middle of the chaos, was my brother. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and he was sweating profusely. He wasn't the confident CEO anymore. He was a desperate man who had just realized his bank account was empty. One of his goons was sweeping everything off the kitchen table. Clatter! My heart stopped. The rock! It tumbled off the table and rolled across the linoleum floor, coming to a stop right at Tunde's polished dress shoes. Tunde looked down. He kicked the rock, frustrated. "Where is he?" he screamed at his men. "He didn't just vanish." "Boss," one of the guards said, "we checked the laptop. Nothing. Just art files." Tunde let out a roar of frustration and picked up the rock. He weighed it in his hand, his eyes wild. "A box of dirt," he muttered, a crazy laugh bubbling up. "That's what he left him. Dirt and a rock." He walked toward the window, winding up his arm like a pitcher. "Useless trash, just like him." "No!" I shouted, bursting into the room before I could stop myself. Tunde froze. He turned slowly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He lowered his arm, still clutching the rock. "Well, well, the prodigal son returns." He stepped over the debris, crushing my sketches under his feet. "You stole it, didn't you, Malik? You hacked the transfer." "I didn't touch your money," I said, holding my hands up, eyes fixed on the rock in his fist. "Baba did. It was automatic." "Liar!" Tunde lunged forward, grabbing me by the collar. He shoved me back against the wall, pinning me with his forearm. He held the rock inches before my face. "Give me the password to the offshore account, or I swear on Baba's grave I will end you right here." "I don't have it," I choked out. "Tunde, listen to me. Put the rock down. You don't know what you're holding." He laughed, tightening his grip. "A piece of garbage, just like I'm holding a thief." "Drop him!" a voice growled from the doorway. Tunde looked up. Mama Kay stood there, the heavy wrench resting casually on her shoulder. She looked like a nightmare. "Who is this? The nanny?" Tunde sneered. "Get her out of here." 2 guards moved toward her. Mama Kay didn't flinch. She swung the wrench with terrifying speed, cracking the first guard in the knee. He went down screaming. The second guard hesitated, and that's all she needed. She stepped in and delivered a sharp uppercut that sent him crumbling to the floor. Tunde stepped back, his eyes wide with fear, but he didn't let go of me. In his panic, his grip on the rock tightened. He raised it high above his head, aiming not at me, but at the granite countertop. "Stay back!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Or I smash this stupid thing, and then I smash your head!" "Don't!" I yelled. "Tunde, if you break that casing, it reacts with the air. It's unstable." He paused, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What?" "It's not a rock, Tunde. It's energy, raw energy. If you crack it, you'll blow this entire building sky high." Silence fell over the room. Tunde looked at the dirty stone in his hand, then back at me. He saw the genuine terror in my eyes. For a second, I thought he was going to hand it over. But then the greed returned. He grinned. "Valuable, huh?" He backed toward the balcony, holding the rock hostage. "Then it sounds like I just got my leverage back." He stepped out onto the metal fire escape, the rain soaking his suit instantly. "You want your inheritance, little brother. Come and get it." He jumped. I ran to the balcony just in time to see him land on the roof of his SUV below, sliding off onto the pavement. He scrambled into the car, clutching the rock like a football. "He's getting away!" I shouted. Mama Kay was already moving. Not for long. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. "He thinks he has a bargaining chip. He doesn't realize he's carrying a beacon." "A beacon?" "That mineral emits a low-level frequency. I can track it anywhere on the planet," she said as we sprinted down the stairs. We burst out the back door just as Tunde's SUV peeled away, tires smoking. "Get in the truck," Mama Kay ordered. But as I reached for the door handle, a black sedan screeched round the corner, blocking our path. 4 men in tactical gear stepped out. They weren't family security, they weren't police, they wore masks, and they were holding military rifles. Mama Kay cursed under her breath. "The vultures," she whispered. "Baba said they would come in a year. Tunde's little stunt brought them in a day." The leader of the tactical group stepped forward, raising his weapon. "The rock," he said, his voice distorted by the mask. "We know the brother has it. Which way did he go?" I looked at Mama Kay. We were trapped. If we told them, Tunde was dead. If we didn't, we were dead. And the most dangerous object on Earth was currently doing 90 miles per hour down the highway in the hands of a man who thought it was just a battery. I opened my mouth to speak, but Mama Kay grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. "On 3, she whispered. "We jumped the fence." "Are you crazy?" I hissed. 1. The men raised their rifles. 2. I braced myself. 3. But before we could move, a deafening explosion ripped through the night sky in the distance. We all turned to look. A massive blue plume of fire was rising from the highway overpass a mile away. It wasn't a gas explosion. It was electric blue, crackling and arcing into the clouds like a reverse lightning bolt. Tunde, he must have dropped it. The leader of the tactical team lowered his gun, staring at the blue inferno. "Go to your men," he shouted. "Secure the site." They jumped back into their sedan and sped off toward the fire. I stood there frozen, watching the blue flames lick the sky. "Tunde," I whispered. Mama Kay dragged me toward the truck. "He might still be alive, but if that shell is cracked, every government satellite in the world just saw that flash. The war just started, Malik. drive. The highway was a scene straight out of a disaster movie. Cars were stopped in every lane, drivers standing by their doors with phones out, filming the chaos. But they weren't filming a fire. They were filming the light. A pillar of electric blue energy was shooting up from the wreckage of Tunde's SUV, silently piercing the night sky. It didn't look like fire. It looked like a glitch in reality. "Don't look at it directly," Mama Kay shouted, swerving her truck onto the emergency shoulder. "It'll burn your retinas. That's raw ionization." We skidded to a halt about 50 yards from the crash. The heat wasn't what hit me first. It was the sound. A low, vibrating hum that I could feel in my teeth. The air smelled like ozone and burnt rubber. "Stay here," I told Mama Kay. "Don't be a hero, Malik," she warned, clutching the steering wheel. "The vultures are already on the ground. I see them." She was right. The black sedan from the apartment had pulled up right next to the burning SUV. The men in tactical gear were moving in, ignoring the confused police officers who were yelling at them to back off. One of the mercenaries raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, scattering the crowd. They were going for the rock. I didn't think. I just moved. I sprinted low along the concrete median, using the stalled cars as cover. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared. I was angry. That was my brother in that car. I reached the wreckage just as the mercenaries were prying the passenger door open. The SUV was crushed like a soda can. Inside, Tunde was pinned against the steering wheel, blood running down his forehead. He looked unconscious. And resting on the dashboard, glowing with a terrifying, pulsing blue light, was the rock. It had cracked down the middle. "Target acquired," one of the mercenaries shouted, reaching for the stone. I grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the road, part of the SUV's bumper, and hurled it. It smashed into the mercenary's helmet, knocking him off balance. He spun around, raising his rifle. "Civilian, back off!" "That's my brother!" I screamed, stepping out from behind the sedan. The mercenary hesitated. That split second was all I needed. I didn't run at him. I ran at the car. I dove through the shattered back window of the SUV, landing on the broken glass in the back seat. "Tunde!" I grabbed his shoulder and shook him. "Wake up!" Tunde groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, confused. "Malik, am I dead?" "Not yet," I grunted, kicking the driver's seat to try and free his legs, "but you're trying your best." Outside, the mercenaries were regrouping. "Frag out!" someone yelled. "Move!" I grabbed Tunde by the collar and hauled him backward. He screamed in pain as his leg came free, but I dragged him over the center console into the back seat with me. I looked at the dashboard. The rock was vibrating violently now. The crack in the stone was widening, leaking that blinding blue light. I wrapped my jacket around my hand and snatched it. It burned, not like fire, but like ice. A cold shock went straight up my arm, making my nerves scream. I shoved the glowing bundle into my hoodie and kicked the back door open. "Go! Go! Go!" I dragged Tunde out onto the pavement just as bullets started pinging off the metal frame of the car. We scrambled over the concrete divider, tumbling down the grassy embankment on the other side of the highway. "My leg!" Tunde whimpered, clutching his knee. "Malik, leave me! They want the rock! Just run!" I looked at him. He was a mess. His expensive suit was shredded, his face was covered in soot, and he was crying. The arrogance was gone. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was just my big brother. "Shut up," I said, hoisting him up. "Baba didn't leave me a box of dirt so I could bury you in it." We stumbled through the tall grass, the sound of boots crunching on the gravel behind us. They were coming. Suddenly, a pair of headlights blinded us. I froze, bracing for impact. The truck door swung open. "Get in!" Mama Kay screamed. I shoved Tunde into the back seat and dove into the passenger side. Mama Kay slammed on the gas before I even closed the door, spinning the truck around and tearing off through a drainage ditch, leaving the mercenaries firing uselessly into the dark. We drove in silence for 10 minutes, putting miles between us and the blue light. Finally, Mama Kay pulled into an abandoned car wash and killed the engine. "Is it safe?" she asked, looking at my pocket. I pulled out the wrapped rock. The blue light had dimmed, but the rock was humming. I unwrapped it carefully. The crack in the stone had sealed itself shut. Tunde was lying in the back seat, breathing heavy. He looked at the rock, then at me, and whispered, "I didn't know. Malik, I swear. I just thought it was valuable. I didn't know it was alive." "It's not alive," Mama Kay snapped, turning around. "It's volatile, and you just rang the dinner bell for every warlord in West Africa." "I can fix it," Tunde stammered. "I can pay them off. I still have the accounts." "You have nothing," I shouted, slamming my hand on the dashboard. Tunde flinched. "The money is gone, Tunde. You sold the company. You betrayed Baba. You have zero leverage." Tunde slumped back, defeated. "Then why did you save me?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "Because you're the only one who knows the code to the vault," I lied. I needed him to stay focused. I needed him to think he was still useful. But then the rock in my hand did something impossible. It stopped humming. The blue light vanished completely. And then a holographic projection shot out of the stone, hovering in the air between us. It wasn't a map. It wasn't a code. It was a countdown. 00235959, and it was ticking down. "What is that?" Tunde whispered, his face pale. Mama Kay leaned in, her eyes widening. "That's not a timer for a bomb, Malik. That's a broadcast timer." "Broadcast?" I asked. "Baba didn't just hide his secrets. He set a dead man switch. If this rock was activated, it means he gave us 24 hours to get to the source. And if we don't?" Mama Kay looked at me grim. "Then the rock uploads every dirty secret, every bribe, and every crime committed by the government directly to the public internet. It won't just destroy the family, Malik. It will burn the entire country to the ground." I stared at the timer. 23 hours. To break into a sunken oil rig, bypass a military blockade, and shut down a system that was designed to destroy everything. "Start the truck," I told Mama Kay. "We're going to the coast."
The drive to the coast was agonizing. Every bump in the road made Tunde groan in pain, clutching his shattered knee. The rock sat on the dashboard, that holographic timer counting down with terrifying indifference. 21:15:00, 21:14:59. "Talk," I said, keeping my eyes on the dark road. "Why does a sunken oil rig matter?" Tunde leaned his head against the cool window, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not an oil rig, Malik. It never was. Baba built Platform Zero in the 90s. The public thought he was drilling for crude. But the drill pipes? They were hollow. They were conduits for fiber optic cables running along the ocean floor." "A server farm?" I asked. "The ultimate server farm," Tunde rasped. "Cooled by the Atlantic Ocean, totally off the grid. No laws, no government oversight. That's where the brain lives, the AI that sorts the data. If that timer hits zero, the rig doesn't just upload the files. It self-destructs to destroy the evidence, and the explosion will trigger a tsunami that wipes out the entire coastline." I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. Baba didn't just leave a legacy, he left a doomsday machine. We hit the marina at 3 a.m. The fog was thick, rolling off the water like smoke. The smell of dead fish and diesel fuel filled the truck cab. This wasn't the yacht club where Tunde kept his boat. This was the fisherman's wharf, the place where smugglers and night crawlers did business. "Mama Kay," I said, killing the lights. "We need a boat, something fast, and we need it 5 minutes ago." Mama Kay checked her tablet. "I made a call. Pier 42. Look for a trawler named the Rusty Saint. The captain owes Baba a life debt."
We helped Tunde out of the truck. He could barely walk. I had to drape his arm over my shoulder, taking his weight. "You used to call me weak," I muttered, dragging him through the mud. "You didn't call me weak," Tunde grunted, wincing with every step. "I called you soft. There's a difference." "Well," I said, stepping over a coil of wet rope, "soft is carrying your sorry behind right now, so shut up." We reached Pier 42. The boat was there, a rusting hulk of metal that looked like it had survived 3 wars. A man was standing on the deck, smoking a pipe. He had one eye and skin like leather. "Captain Jojo?" Mama Kay called out softly. The man squinted at us. He looked at Mama Kay, then at the glowing rock in my pocket, which was pulsing through the fabric. He didn't say a word. He just nodded and motioned for us to board. But as I stepped onto the wooden gangplank, the hair on my arms stood up. Silence. The docks were too quiet. Even the seagulls were gone. "Wait," I whispered, freezing in place. "What is it?" Tunde hissed. "Move, my leg is killing me." "Shh." I scanned the perimeter. My eyes landed on a row of shipping containers stacked about 50 yards away. To anyone else, they were just metal boxes, but I noticed the reflection, a tiny glint of light, rhythmic and steady. A scope. "Ambush!" I yelled, shoving Tunde forward onto the deck. Crack! A bullet splintered the wood right where my foot had been a second ago. "Go, go, go!" Mama Kay screamed, vaulting onto the boat. Captain Jojo didn't hesitate. He slammed the throttle forward. The old engine roared to life, coughing black smoke. The boat lurched away from the dock, just as 3 SUVs tore around the corner, headlights blinding us. Men in tactical gear poured out of the cars, lining up on the pier. They opened fire. Bullets pinged off the metal hull of the Rusty Saint like hail. I dragged Tunde behind a rusted winch, covering his head. "They found us!" Tunde screamed. "How did they find us?" They didn't track the rock, I realized, watching the shore fade into the fog. They tracked you, Tunde. Your watch. It's a smartwatch. Tunde looked down at his wrist, the expensive platinum watch he loved so much. He ripped it off and threw it into the ocean with a curse. We motored out into open water. The gunfire faded, replaced by the rhythmic crashing of waves. We were safe for now, but the timer was still ticking. 19:00. I went up to the bridge. Captain Jojo was steering, his one good eye fixed on the radar. "Platform 0 is about 40 miles out. Rough waters tonight. A storm is coming." "We can handle a storm," I said. He looked at me. "It's not the weather I'm worried about, son. Look at the radar." I looked at the green screen. There was a large blip in the center. That was the rig. But circling the rig were 3 smaller blips, stationary, waiting. "What are those?" I asked. "Gunboats," Jojo said grimly. "Someone beat you to it." "The rig is surrounded." I ran back to the deck. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky a bruised purple. In the distance, I could see it. Platform 0. It was a massive, rusting skeleton rising out of the ocean like a dead giant. But Jojo was right. There were 3 sleek military-grade patrol boats circling the base, and on the main deck of the rig, I could see lights, floodlights. Someone was already on board. "Are they vultures?" Mama Kay asked, joining me at the rail. I pulled out a pair of binoculars I found in a storage locker. I adjusted the focus, zooming in on the figures moving on the rig's helipad. They weren't wearing the black tactical gear of the mercenaries. They were wearing white suits, hazmat suits. And then I saw the flag fluttering from the radio tower. It wasn't a Nigerian flag. It wasn't an American flag. It was a flag with a symbol I recognized from the history books. A symbol of a private military corporation that was supposed to have been disbanded 20 years ago for war crimes. "No," I whispered, lowering the binoculars. "It's not the vultures." "Who is it?" Tunde asked, limping over. I looked at him, my blood running cold. It's the ghosts, the syndicate Baba stole the initial capital from to build his empire. They didn't come for the money, they came to finish the war. Suddenly, a loud siren wailed from the rig, echoing across the water. A spotlight swung around, locking directly onto our small fishing boat. They knew we were here, and as I looked up at the towering rig, I realized the countdown wasn't just for the data upload, it was counting down to something much, much worse. The spotlight was blinding. It felt like the eye of God staring right down at us. "Get down!" Captain Jojo roared, spinning the wooden wheel of the rusty saint with only one hand. The water around us erupted. Zip, zip, splash. Bullets from the patrol boats were tearing up the ocean surface, inching closer to our hull. We were sitting ducks, a floating target in a barrel. "We can't outrun them," Mama Kay shouted, crouching behind a stack of crab traps. "They have 50 caliber machine guns." "I'm not trying to outrun them," Jojo grit out, his good eye narrowed. "I'm getting under them." He slammed the throttle to the max. The old engine screamed, sounding like it was about to explode. We didn't turn away from the rig, we headed straight for it. "Are you crazy?" Tunde yelled, clutching his bad leg. "You're going to crash us." "Hold on," Jojo yelled. We shot forward, cutting through the waves. The gunfire grew deafening, metal pinging off the railing, and then shadow. We slammed into the darkness underneath the massive oil rig. The patrol boats couldn't follow us in here. The concrete pylons were too close together, a maze of barnacles and steel. Jojo cut the engine instantly. The silence was sudden and heavy, broken only by the sound of water lapping against the concrete legs of the platform. "We are in their blind spot," Jojo whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But not for long. Look." He pointed up. High above us, a rusted service ladder disappeared into the fog, leading up to the rig's underbelly. "That's the only way in," Mama Kay said. I looked at Tunde. He was pale, his leg wrapped in a bloody strip of shirt. "He can't make that climb," I said. Tunde looked at the ladder, then at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded pocket knife. "Then leave me," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "I'll make noise, distract them. You take the rock and go." I grabbed the front of his torn suit. "Shut up," I snapped. "You spent your whole life trying to leave me behind, Tunde. I'm not doing the same to you." I turned my back to him. "Get on." "Malik, get on." He hesitated, then wrapped his arms around my neck. I grunted under the weight. I wasn't the strong one. I wasn't the athlete. I was the artist. But adrenaline is a powerful thing. I grabbed the rusted rungs. The metal was cold and slick with sea slime. 1 rung, 2 rungs. My arms burned. Tunde was heavy, but the anger I felt toward the people on top of this rig was heavier. They wanted to erase my family? Not today. We climbed for what felt like an hour. My fingers were raw. Mama Kay was right below me, moving with a speed that defied her age. Finally, we reached a metal grate. Mama Kay popped the latch, and we pulled ourselves up into the humid, humming belly of Platform 0. It didn't look like an oil rig inside. It looked like the inside of a computer. Massive cooling pipes pulsed with blue light. The hum was deafening here. 58 minutes. The holographic timer on the rock in my pocket was ticking down. Less than an hour. "The server room is in the central spire," Tunde whispered, checking his memory of the blueprints he had once tried to sell. "Top level, that's where the kill switch is." We moved through the shadows, dodging patrols of men in white hazmat suits. They weren't just guarding the place, they were dismantling it. They were stripping hard drives, packing servers into crates. "They're not just destroying the data," Mama Kay realized, stopping behind a generator. "The ghosts, they want Baba's blackmail files for themselves." We reached the heavy steel door of the central control room. It was locked with an electronic keypad. "I can't hack this," Mama Kay said, looking at the complex panel. "It's hardwired, air-gapped." I felt the rock in my pocket get hot. It was vibrating against my hip bone. I pulled it out. The blue light was pulsing in sync with the lights on the door panel. "It wants in," I whispered. I held the rock up to the keypad. A spark of blue energy jumped from the stone to the metal. The keypad fried, sizzling with smoke. The heavy bolts retracted with a loud clunk. I kicked the door open. The room was massive. Walls of screens covered every surface, showing global financial markets, satellite feeds, and government databases. In the center of the room was a single terminal, the brain. But we weren't alone. Standing at the terminal, typing furiously, was a man in a pristine white suit. He didn't turn around when we entered. He just kept typing. "You're late, Malik," the man said, his voice calm, British accent polished. "Step away from the console," Mama Kay shouted, aiming her shotgun. The man stopped typing. He turned around slowly. He was older, silver hair, wearing glasses that looked more expensive than my car. I didn't recognize him, but Tunde did. Tunde gasped, leaning against the doorframe. "Mr. Sterling?" "Who is he?" I asked, keeping the rock raised like a weapon. "He's the investor," Tunde whispered, horror in his voice. "The one in Dubai, the one who bought the tech division. He's the one I sold the company to." Mr. Sterling smiled. It was a cold, shark-like smile. "Technically, Tunde, you sold it to a shell company, which I own, just like I own the debt your father racked up, just like I own this rig." He walked around the desk. "Your grandfather was a brilliant thief, Malik. He stole the initial capital from us 50 years ago. He built an empire on our money. We just came to collect interest." "Shut it down," I ordered, stepping forward. "Stop the countdown." "I can't," Sterling said, shrugging. "Only the biometric key can stop it, and I suspect—" "You look at the glowing rock in your hand. You are holding the only key in existence." "Then I'll stop it myself," I said, moving toward the console. "I wouldn't do that," Sterling said softly. He pressed a button on a small remote in his hand. A side door opened. 2 massive guards dragged a prisoner into the room. My blood froze. It wasn't my father. It wasn't my mother. It was a girl, a teenager, maybe 16. She was terrified, duct tape over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sterling walked over and put a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You don't know her? That's a shame. Malik, meet Amara, your half-sister." The room spun. Sister? Baba had many secrets, Sterling grinned. Amara was his favorite. He kept her hidden to protect her. But we found her. Sterling pulled a gun and pressed it to the girl's temple. "So here's the deal," Sterling said, holding out his other hand. "You give me the rock, I get the energy source, the data, and the world keeps spinning. Or you keep the rock, the timer hits 0, the rig explodes, the data leaks, and I put a bullet in this girl's temple before we all sink to the bottom of the ocean." I looked at Tunde. He was in shock. I looked at Mama Kay. She was aiming her gun, but she was shaking. I looked at the girl. She had Baba's eyes, the same fierce, dark eyes that had looked at me from that hospital bed. 10 minutes. "Tick-tock, Malik," Sterling whispered. "What is it going to be? The legacy or the blood?" I looked down at the rock. It was glowing so bright it hurt to look at. I looked at Sterling, and I realized something. Baba was a builder. He always had a blueprint, and he always had a back door. I gripped the rock tight. "You want the rock?" I asked, stepping forward. "Yes," Sterling said, his eyes greedy. "Catch," I said, and I threw it. Not at him. I threw it straight into the spinning cooling fan of the main server.
I threw the rock. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Sterling's eyes widen behind his expensive glasses. I saw Tunde reach out as if he could catch it. I saw Amara squeeze her eyes shut. The rock hit the spinning titanium blades of the cooling fan with a sickening crunch. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the world turned white. A shockwave of pure, ionized blue energy exploded outward. It wasn't a fire blast, it was a magnetic pulse. The monitors on the walls shattered instantly. The lights blew out. The humming of the servers died into a terrifying silence. Sterling screamed, dropping the gun as the feedback loop fried the electronics in the room, including the earpiece he was wearing. "Now!" Mama Kay shouted. She didn't need a gun anymore. She lunged through the darkness, tackling Sterling with the force of a linebacker. They crashed into the desk, sending glass and metal flying. I scrambled across the floor toward Amara. "I got you! I got you!" I yelled, ripping the tape off her mouth and untying her hands. She was shaking violently, clinging to me. "The door!" Tunde yelled. "The electronic lock is dead. We have to force it." Sterling was fighting back, punching Mama Kay, but Tunde, my bougie corporate brother, grabbed a heavy metal fire extinguisher from the wall. He didn't hesitate. He swung it, connecting with Sterling's shoulder. Sterling crumpled to the floor, groaning. "Go!" Tunde shouted, his voice raw. "Get them out!" We forced the heavy steel doors open manually, muscles straining. The rig was in chaos. Emergency red lights were the only things working. The ghosts in their hazmat suits were running blind, their comms dead, their systems fried. We scrambled back down the ladder, the wind howling around us. The descent was harder this time. My legs felt like jelly. But we made it to the Rusty Saint. As Captain Jojo gunned the engine, speeding us away from the rig, I looked back. Platform Zero wasn't exploding in a ball of fire. It was just dead, a dark, silent skeleton in the middle of the ocean. The data, the blackmail, the leverage, it was all gone, fried by the very energy source they tried to steal. We watched from the deck as military helicopters, Nigerian Navy this time, the real ones, swarmed the rig. Mama Kay had sent the coordinates before we even boarded. Sterling wasn't going to a board meeting. He was going to a black site prison. Tunde sat on a crate holding his broken leg. He looked at the rig, then at his empty hands. The millions were gone. The tech company was gone. The reputation was gone. "We lost everything," he whispered. I looked at Amara, who was sleeping on Mama Kay's shoulder, wrapped in a blanket. I looked at Tunde, alive. "No," I said, sitting next to him. "We just lost the things that were killing us." 6 months later, I parked my old Honda in front of the renovated shop. The sign above the door was fresh, hand-painted in bright colors, The Foundation. It wasn't a tech company, it wasn't a conglomerate, it was a community art center and repair shop. We taught kids how to code, how to paint, and how to fix old radios, just like Baba used to. I walked inside. The smell of dust and solder was gone, replaced by fresh coffee and acrylic paint. "Malik, you're late!" I looked over at the front desk. Amara was there, organizing files. She was smiling, wearing a school uniform. She lived with me now. We were learning how to be siblings. In the back, Tunde was wearing jeans and a t-shirt covered in grease. He was teaching a group of teenagers how to rebuild a generator. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't checking a Rolex. He was laughing.
He had lost the penthouse, the cars, and the fake friends, but he looked 10 years younger. My parents stopped by occasionally. They were downsizing, moving into a small condo. My father was quieter these days. He didn't talk about empires anymore. He talked about the weather. It was a start. I walked to my office in the back, the same room where I had found the cassette tape. On my desk sat the wooden shoebox. I had kept it. I opened the lid. The rock was gone, destroyed in the rig, but the red dirt was still there. I ran my fingers through the soil. For a long time I thought Baba played a cruel joke on me. I thought he left me nothing. But then I remembered the last thing he said to me in the hospital. The loud ones get the scraps, the quiet ones get the feast. He knew the empire was rotten. He knew the money was poisoned. He knew the only way to save the family was to let it all burn down so we could build something real on top of the ashes. He didn't leave me the harvest. He left me the seed. The door chimes rang. A young boy walked in, clutching a broken toy robot, looking nervous. He looked at Tunde, then at me. "Can you fix it?" he whispered. I smiled, picking up a screwdriver. "I don't know. Let's open it up and see what's inside." I wasn't a billionaire, I wasn't a CEO, but as I looked around the shop, hearing Tunde laugh and Amara hum a song, I realized I was the richest man in Lagos. Baba was right. The box wasn't empty. It was full of the only thing that matters: a fresh start. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to The Family Fractures. We share stories like this every week. And tell me in the comments, if you were left a box of dirt, would you have thrown it away? Thanks for watching.